And all right, so if anybody's watching on the replay, they will see us kind of awkwardly waiting for the live group. But now that we're about 15 seconds in, welcome everybody to another Thursday night. It is the CarrGuy and SixFan show. We like to joke it's the gold standard of automotive talk here, live stream on YouTube. And as you guys know, it is season 3, so we have a guest tonight. But before we introduce our guest, I'll switch it over to the co-host tonight.
Yeah, so my name is Jason. I am Old Car Guy, and you guys know my channel if you've been here before. But if you're not and you're new, we have a pretty unique situation here where we talk cars and we take some questions from you guys. And once in a while, we have a guest. And this week, I'm going to let Grant introduce our guest for tonight.
Yeah, so with us tonight, special guest is Rob Kibbe of the Musclecar Place Podcast, the Kibbe and Friends channel here on YouTube. And Rob, I think you actually maybe have one other endeavor, but I'll kind of turn it over to you and let you kind of fill in any blanks that I may have missed about what you currently have running. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm a podcaster. I know next to nothing about YouTube. So you guys will have to just fill in the blanks for that. But I own a business called the Musclecar Place. I started this in 2009. I'm a mechanical engineer by education. And once I got out into the real world doing real engineer stuff, I realized that was not for me. So I wanted to do something else. And there's a longer story to that. But my passion, since the day I can remember having a passion, was cars. So I grew up in the era of like golden car TV shows, and the Dukes of Hazzard was my favorite, but they're all good. Knight Rider, A-Team, like movies like Back to the Future, where the car is a character, like Herbie the Love, like something that has a soul. So I guess that stuck with me. I'm sure a lot of people from my generation can really relate. But when I needed a business, I needed something built around cars. And my favorite kind of cars are classic, muscle cars, 60s, 70s. Really, there's no bad one, in my opinion. The problem was I have a wife, I have kids, I have a responsibility. Like, how am I going to go into business for myself? I have no idea how to go into business for myself. My parents are not entrepreneurs. I don't know squat about this. And I went on a lifelong journey of starting a business that I thought was going to compete with Auto Trader. So what I wanted to do was list classic cars online, specifically muscle cars. So I'm an engineer, so I kind of geeked out, put a bunch of code together with some good programmers, and we made this website to list classic cars called the musclecarplace.com. That kind of worked. I started a weekly podcast show to promote that business because I just like podcast shows. I was a listener. I seek those out. I wish I'd have known in college that I'm an audio learner. That would have been great. But I did this show, and then I started getting contacted about a year and a half in by sponsors, like companies, to advertise with me, to spend money. And I didn't know that was a thing. It was wonderful news when somebody wanted to invest not only in my show, but more specifically my audience. And that's when the light kind of went on. Like, I'm not in the classic car classifieds business at all. I'm in the content creation business, and the content that I like to create and that I know is podcasts. So 10 years later, hundreds of shows later, multiple brands later, some shows have come, some have gone, with one professional producer, one writer, one media guy, a couple helpers here and there. Here we are. It's easy to be in the top of iTunes now, but I'm only here because I just have never quit, frankly. And today the space is probably a little more cluttered. It would be much harder to get into it today. But if you're, like you guys, if you're in to win it, you're committed, you can't think of anything better to do. This is why we're doing what we're doing. So we do have a YouTube channel, but that's really just to rebroadcast the audio shows. We're not creating special content with filmed production, nothing like that. That's way too hard for me.
So, Rob, you had mentioned some of the shows that you grew up on, and immediately you gave your age away. So Knowing that you and I grew up on those same shows, do you have any cars of your own? And if you do, tell me a little bit about those.
Oh, dude. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So my first and favorite car is a 64 Chevelle. And cars to me are not investments. They should be, but they aren't. They're totally emotional. So I have a 64 Chevelle that was my parents' first new car. But when I was a kid, that was my dad's daily driver. And every kid wants to grow up to be their dad, or at least a lot of them do, and I did. And my dad's 64 Chevelle, when it was a 20-year-old car, like most cars in the Midwest where I live, were rusted out and left for dead. Only a 20-year-old car. Cars today are so much better. They age better, but those were gone and dead. But I knew that car needed me, and somebody had to look out for it and protect it. And why are there no quarter panels? And what's wrong with the holes in the floor? But I loved that car. My dad is a big softie, so he just kept it until I was in high school, and then we restored it the first time. Then we restored it again. I hopped it up in college because by then Hotchkiss suspension and like kind of cool parts were coming out. And I put a 350 in it, and I put a 4-speed in it. And then as a result of the podcast show, one of my listeners the day I took my podcast show from kind of a side business to a full-time profession, I got contacted by a longtime listener who said, I've always wanted to have my own classic car shop. Been my lifelong dream. I'd like to build your car for you as a gift for the inspiration. So A, that's awesome. But B, I contacted said like, dude, this is a terrible idea. You don't want to do this. I can't say yes to this. If you're married, you're going to be divorced. Don't do it. And he said, he's one of my best friends today. He said, look, okay, I didn't tell you this part. I'm a captain for an airline. Like, things are fine. I can do this. And this is my hobby, but I want it to be, I'm going to build like 3 cars every 10 years. That's the kind of business I want to operate. So to cut to the chase, that car went to SEMA in 2013 and is my 64 Chevelle LS3 powered 6-speed T56, Magnum 9-inch rear, built to the hilt car, but it's still white with red interior. And as a car, my mom were still alive, she would recognize it. Like, it's her car. That's car number 1. Car number 2 is a 73 Volkswagen Karmann Ghia. Same story, same dad, same rust bucket case, but we restored it 2 years ago. So you figured out my age. I'm 44. My dad parked that car when I was 12. So, hang on to him because eventually it'll work out. Never count the money. That would be a terrible idea. And then number 3 is I have this car right here. That one.
Ooh.
I have a General Lee. And it is freaking awesome. So I, as a kid, I always wanted to drive the General Lee. And on our podcast show, what started as the Kibbe and Finnegan show, my buddy Mike Finnegan, is now called the Kibbe and Friends show. And our idea was we're going to make a sports talk radio show, but instead of sports, we're going to review pop culture car shows and movies. And the one we chose was the Dukes of Hazzard. So we've been going through that, reviewing the episode week by week. And just to kind of promote that and just as a good excuse, I wanted a General Lee. So I bought a painted up General Lee. It was orange and it had the decals and it had a 383 and it literally needed everything else. All of it. And that was awesome. That was just what I wanted. Like, I want to build this thing just as I want. I chose to go kind of a nerdy, like season 2 route. And in the earlier seasons of the Dukes of Hazzard, the car had a different look than it did in the later seasons. The later seasons, it was a little cleaner. It was better done, a more consistent car to car, but I like the sloppy ones. So I like the ones with a little push bar and the dark interior. Sometimes it's brown, sometimes it's black. Sometimes they're 68s, sometimes they're 69s. They didn't care. They just painted them, jumped them, whatever. That's the car I built. And I have also had the chance to do that with listeners. That's been freaking fun. So that's where I'm to just put a Holley throttle body fuel injection system in it with another listener in Texas. It's so fun. I can't tell you how much fun it is. Those are my fun cars, but there's others that have kind of come and gone, but those are the ones that I'll probably never let go.
That's really neat because as kids, I'm 4 as well, so I kind of, like I said, I guess your age right off the bat. But growing up with the General Lee, that was kind of one of the cars that every teenage boy aspires to have at some point in your life. And you've gone and done that. So before we get to the next question, I just really want to quickly jump over to the chat and acknowledge some of the guys who have jumped in to join into the show this evening. Matt MPG has just jumped in there. Arc Cricket, King Eric the Great, CJ Colvin, an Auto Addiction, America Bumper to Bumper, Brian Beeler. I'm in there. Hi. Who else do we got in there? Efer Garage, Craving Cars, Will's Wheels, Chris Dirty Truck 08. My goodness, we got a lot of people in here tonight. And I think we pretty much covered just about everybody. I apologize if I missed anyone. Welcome to the show. It is the CarrGuy and SixFan show with our very special guest, Rob Kibbe. Grant, do you have some more questions for Rob?
Well,
we can carry on here?
And just that weekly reminder, the more people in here, the better it is. So go ahead and take a moment to share this on your social media, get that out there. But Rob, there's so many things that you've already hit on that strike a chord with me because so you're a mechanical engineer and I work with you guys often as an architect. And there were times in my job where I wasn't necessarily enjoying the project deadlines and the stress and all of that. And so I don't know, early about 2012, I got into podcasting. It was sports podcasting, but I've also been a big time kind of pro touring fan. And I believe it was pro-touring.com that I lurked on forever. And I think that's how I stumbled upon the Musclecar Place. But kind of full circle, it was great to book you this week because you're coming on the heels of an episode of yours that I've listened to time and time again when you interviewed Ben Hermance. He was our guest last week. Oh, yeah. That's an episode, and I looked that up before last week's episode. I think it's 2013, and it's like I've probably every year and a half I probably listen to that because
I have I have so many. Ben did the design of my Chevelle. I bought his wheels through Forge Line, which are still awesome as people still want. Ben's the coolest. He helped me with a baseball product. How's he doing? I haven't talked to him for. I'm sorry. That is not your question.
That's all right. No, that's good.
That.
Well, when we end the show, you can always watch last week's episode. So
I'll do that.
Just so you know, Rob. So Jason and I switch off every other week which channel hosts it. So I was on his channel last week. But anyway, it was just so you got into podcasting. You talked about it. It's the content creator business. That's what this show is meant to be about too. All of us aspiring YouTubers. It's all about creating content. And so there's, even though you admitted to, it's funny because the for you, the YouTube is the supplement to your podcasting, but they're saying to all of us YouTubers that you need to start a podcast to be the supplement to your channel, like record an episode like this and kick it out to iTunes. And so it's just kind of funny. Like we just flip with you as our guest, we're flipping that on its head. And so just talk about like the struggles of building a brand and like kind of, you mentioned it out of the gate where you were trying to shoot for this auto trader like setup, but talk a little bit about some of the struggles or lessons you've learned building your brand over the years as a podcaster. What have you found that worked, kind of getting you more exposure as the years went on?
Well, there's so many things that you can go do and try and attempt. But I think for any creator, the biggest thing to do is the grind, to work the grind, to be consistent. So if you're going to release a weekly show, drop a show every week at the same day, at the same time, with really great, your best ever content that you can put out. That can get hard when you're doing multiple shows per week. So on our channel right now, you're kind of scrolling through. We put out, we personally do and host 9 to 10 shows per month. Plus, we also produce shows for other podcast companies. And one of the things, that worked really well. So your question was what worked well. So A, we worked the process. We just produce a lot of content. B, we try to make it better every week. The first actual professional I hired was a producer. And pretty much every level of success I've had in this business has come through the connections of my show, either from somebody who listened to it, like yourself, or from somebody that was a listener that wanted to be a part of it. And those are two definitely different things. Our producer is named Bernie McPartland. He is out of Dallas, Texas, and he spent 25 years in Christian radio production, but his passion is cars. and he came aboard to be our producer to take the load off of me. And I knew that somebody else would be better at doing the edit and the publication. He's a publisher. I'm an editor. I just hack stuff, tighter. He makes it better. He puts in the funny drops. He puts a polish on the levels. That was one of the best things that we could do, because for those of you who are looking for sponsorship or to make money as a result of your show, if your show is just the front door to your business, great. But if your show is your business, like meaning you're trying to make dollars and cents from it, that's your product. It's got to be as good as you can make it every time you make it, and hopefully better the next time than it was the last time. I'm not saying anything new that you guys have never heard. I know, right? But that is what has worked best for me. I've had a little dream list of clients. I'm proud to say I've crossed maybe 3 or 4 of them off out of like the top 10 that I could ever dream up of. Holly was one of them, and I realized that that's not a big deal. Like if you're in the shoe business or something, but for me in the car business, it's Holly, right? I mean, it's freaking Holly. That was a cool thing, and it only happened after we'd been in business for 10 years, putting out piece after piece after piece after piece after piece, when their marketing director called me and said, my CEO is telling me we got to get into the social media space, and you're the only podcast I know. So should we do some business with you? That's what has worked for me. And I realize that's not a sexy, glamorous answer, but it's really just working the grind. Now, here's the flip side. I love doing this. I'm in love with the audio product. I listen to other podcast shows. I listen to sports talk radio. I'm addicted to that stuff. I like it too. If this is a business that you're in and you enjoy the process of making the content, you're in the right business. If it gets old and you start to hate it, you're in the wrong business. Just quit or get somebody else. Get somebody to do it for you, and you can run the business side of it. But that is what has worked the best for me. I look forward to making the next show. I always look forward to making the next show. I can't wait to do that. Some of the stuff that's just part of any business, like it's tax season right now, right? So nobody who loves that, but that I tolerate to get to the process of making shows.
Well, and you touched on something too, Rob, that I'm passionate with, and obviously I'm passionate about cars. Not only is my last name Carr, but my dad and I own a used car dealership that we sell, and we do car repairs. And
Cool.
My dad was a big car guy growing up, and the whole time I was growing up, it was always an old car of some sort somewhere in the family, and that takes place today. I've got a couple of my own, and as you said, you kind of find something that you're passionate with, and you build on it, and you keep working at it, and you want to make sure that you're producing the absolute best product that you can do. At what point in your passion of cars did you say, I need to make this jump, I need to do this full time?
For me, it was about 1.5 years in. And this is, so I mentioned I didn't come from an entrepreneurial family. I really didn't. That for me was the scarier part to learn, to learn how to go out on your own. I'd never run a small business. I'd never been part of nothing. So getting myself prepared that I could read the tea leaves, so that I knew I just had enough income coming in to support not just myself, but wife and kids. That was more the trick for me learning how to make the jump. But about 1 year in, when sponsors started calling, then it started to make sense. I've always operated another business along with this, because I do have a wife and kids, and I just always want a little bit more. just sometimes things ebb and flow. This business here has actually been the most steady thing I've ever done, for good or for bad. But I've always tried to be entrepreneurial in other spaces as well. Some are automotive, some are not. One's in sporting good. I mentioned the Ben Hermans. That's a baseball product that I helped get developed. So making the leap for me wasn't necessarily into just being a content creator. It was just becoming an entrepreneur, a self-employed person, the person who writes the front side of the paycheck, that side. And that was the big leap. It's been 10 years now. There have been 2 years that were really genuinely hard, like terrifyingly hard. And then there have been other years where, you were just waiting for the other shoe to drop because things were so good. That I don't know. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but once I had a good solid pattern of income, and I knew I had my debts handled. I had plenty in the bank just in case, like a good solid 6 months of cash just sitting, just in case. Still do. That's when I knew it was okay to go ahead and pull the trigger.
No, I think everything you're talking about, Rob. I mean, without some of the conversation that Jason and I had off the air before you jumped on, I mean, I think there's a lot in there to kind of unpack, and timing it is everything, I guess. That it's a message well received. So, but I did want to talk about, the more you do it, the more connections you make, and it's this game that we all play, I guess. This YouTuber or podcasting, the content creator life is about those relationships and making connections, as you speak of. So tell us a little bit, how was it that it came to be that you and Mike Finnegan just relationship started?
Yeah. So that was an interesting one. So I when I met Mike, I didn't even really know what roadkill was. I figured that out very quickly after the fact. But I was doing business development for a company called FM3. And FM3 is a paint code. That's a Mopar paint code for, I think, Panther Pink. But FM3 is a company that named themselves after this paint code because they create high impact events. And they were the company at the time that was putting on the Hot Rod Power Tour. So when you go on the Hot Rod Power Tour, that's put on by an event company. Hot Rod Magazine has nothing to do with it. I mean, they're the banner on the front, but the company that actually schedules the logistics and gets the trucks and trailers in and the porta potties and that's a totally different company. And they were friends, many year friends, and they needed some biz dev work. So I did that, and part of that was going on the Hot Rod Power Tour and just working the tour with them. So I did that. At the end of the tour, there was this dinner for the production company and then the Hot Rod cool people. And I met Mike Finnegan at like a salad bar, maybe. I don't remember. I did not know who he was. I knew his name was Mike, and I knew he was a big deal, but I really didn't know a lot about roadkill. But we just got along so well. I just really liked him. And it was at the end of the tour, and everybody wanted to go home, and I think he and I mutually were ready to leave. But I asked him, I said, "Hey, would you ever like to be a guest on a podcast?" And he goes, "Yeah, that'd be awesome." So a couple months later, he came on a show, and we just had a marvelous time. And then he did that again, and then again, and then I just contacted him. And I said, "Look, I don't know if you'd like to co-host a show, but I think we could probably pull that off. Would you like to do that?" And he just said yes. So I mean, it was just good timing. He has become a very good friend, a dear friend. I mean, a year ago, he had to call and say, "Look, I'm tapped out. I don't have the time to do this." And there are other, frankly, just he's a pretty big name. There are other ways that I can do better, financially here. So, so we to this day remain good friends, and we just rebranded the show with one of our insiders and put him up as the co-host, and he's done a great job too. But no, Mike's a good dude. Everybody that he's working with, David Newburn is a really great guy. All aces. I have nothing but good things to say.
Well, Rob, before we get into another question from me, we just want to make sure that we open it up to the chat. So if you guys have any questions in the chat there for Rob that you'd like to have answered, go ahead and type them in, and we'll make sure that we spend some time near the end of the show answering up those questions. So, Rob, one of the things that I always like to ask some of our guests, and totally a little bit off topic from what we've been talking about, what was your first vehicle that you ever owned?
That I ever owned, or that I got was just tasked to me?
Which I guess I'm going back to, like, say, okay, we're in high school. That's when you get your license. What was the first vehicle you drove to high school?
76 Chevy Nova, straight six, automatic, which was purchased for my older sister and then taken away from her. She was off in college by that point. She'd already wrecked it once, and it was available. So that was my car. And my Chevelle at that time was too rotted out to drive.
Well, Rob, you kind of killed two birds with one stone with that first car, because my older brother's got a 77 Nova. I remember you talking to Ben about the Spirit of 76 on your show. And so that was, I've always, when somebody has a 4th gen Nova, I take note. So, and then of course, my channel being straight SixFan, I mean, you just you're really playing to the crowd right now. But Jason and I like to call those cars,
yes,
we call them odd bodies. It's kind of that, that OPEC era and we talked a lot about this last week with Ben, of course, how, it's just it's Detroit's forgotten age, but as, years have gone on, so I'm 34, but kind of to your point, the 20-year-old 64 Chevelle for you, in your youth, it was I was always hearing my dad's stories about his 72 Nova or 72 El Camino. And, you are just thinking the yesteryear must have been so great. And you have all this appeal. Well, as years go by and we all get older, those cars get older too, and they get harder and harder to find. So Jason and I have taken a liking to this sort of that forgotten era, because they're such unmolested cars, and just kind of the creativity, do something different, stand out a little bit at a car show. So if it wasn't a 76 Nova for you, do you have a car that you particularly like out of that, we'll call it 73 to 81 era?
Oh yeah. Geez. Well, I mean, the cliche answer is smoking the Bandit or something like that, which is a really awesome looking car. I have my little boy Dallas. He calls the Corvettes from that era humpy Corvettes, and most people love the chrome bumper vets 68 to 72, and I do. But I have found myself looking at the plastic ones, and I know they were slow the day they were made, but we can fix that.
Yeah,
we can make that better. I think those are great looking cars. I am getting more and more interested, and I can't believe I'm even saying this, but just untouched cars. My mom drove a 76 Cadillac Sedan DeVille, and it was a used old car when we got it. But there's another one running around town here, and it just hasn't been taken apart. I'm kind of fascinated by those. Foreign cars, I think they're all coming into their own, and you can figure this out when you go to a Good Guy show or the Hot Rod Power Tour, because some of the trendsetters will show up as soon as they bump the year. So in Good Guys car shows, up until last year, the cutoff was 1972. Well, now it's 1987. Boom, a whole new flood of cars came in, and I know them. You asked about the 73 to 80. For me, the 80s are starting to come into their own big time, especially with F bodies and all the Fox body Mustangs, all the G cars. It goes on and on and on. Ben Hermance has done some of the coolest renderings I've ever seen of the X bodies, like a 77 Ventura maybe or something like that. You tuck some bumpers and open up a wheel well here or there, it starts to get pretty good.
So, Rob, we've got a question coming in from the chat from Terry Eford Garage, and he's saying, what would be some good starter equipment for somebody wanting to start a podcast?
Good question. So it's pretty basic. First thing you want to do is figure out what your format is before you figure out what equipment you want to buy. So if you're going a solo hosted show, or you're going something like this where it's with a co-host or a producer or something like that, that will drive what you need to buy. But let's just say it's the simplest one, which is a solo show. You need a good quality microphone. You need something to record into. I would recommend not recording into your computer. And a standalone audio recorder for that would be just fine. That's about as bare bones as you can get to do something of decent quality. And then as far as editing software and for the equipment, I am using right now a Heil PR40. I have a few of these. I've had this one forever. It is a dynamic microphone. It's not powered, and it's nice. A condenser microphone is what you might find more in a radio station, but it's also really boomy. I mean, they have to be in a soundproof room for those to work. I can take this out to a trade show, and you'll hear people in the background. For the most part, you hear who's speaking directly in. So definitely get yourself a decent microphone. You won't have to spend more than $300 to get there at this point. Things have gotten really cheap. As far as a recorder, Zune, there are a few different ones out there. I have a Roland. I have an old one, a Roland. You know what? I don't even know what it is. The logo rubbed off. It's a Roland. But the reason I said don't record into your computer is because you do get a little bit of a hiss, and maybe those are better now, but you also always have just a more solid product. There's nothing running in the background. There's nothing really to screw it up. You always have an extra copy. Plus, you have something that you can take out in the field. Most handheld recorders at least have a couple of mics on there that you can use as a secondary, not as good, but an okay option. Hopefully that answers your question. For under $1,000, you'll be just fine. And just spend a little time on YouTube or hit a couple podcast websites. They'll recommend what you need.
Yeah, it seems as though that no matter what you're doing when it comes to creating content, you can get away with it a little bit less expensive than somebody else. But just like creating YouTube videos, you can do it from your phone, or you can go and create whatever you want with the big fancy expensive cameras. So yeah, you can spend to your heart's content, but I think that's really great, because I think Grant and I have talked a little bit about taking this show to possibly a podcast format. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn, Grant, but maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Oh yeah, no, that's exactly what we're doing. I mean, I know when I started in 2012, I mean, I bought this mixer and a couple of mics because we were hoping to do a sports podcast show, where maybe you might go to a bar before a college football game and have 4 people huddled around. So having 4 channels was something that I needed. But I mean, this equipment that I use is still 8 years old, and kind of like your mic, Rob, it's still works great. But yeah, no, everything you said about recording your computer, because that's what I did. There was a lot of noise removing, clipping, editing I had to do, and Audacity is a great open source audio editor, Kip, if you are looking for something to edit in. And if you're not a Mac user, that's what I would recommend. But
here's a good resource, smartpassiveincome.com. That's run by a guy named Pat Flynn. Smartpassiveincome.com. He has a whole section and tutorial, and some of which is free and some of which is pay, that'll help you with some background knowledge on podcasting. I know Pat. He's not a super close buddy, but we have known each other for a long time. He makes great content, and I have bought several of his courses just to continue to better myself. But he'll have lots of good info out there, and a lot of it's free.
Well, Rob, you talked a couple times about Hot Rod Power Tour, and if I'm not mistaken, if I remember right, you're either from Iowa or Indiana. Are you?
Iowa, yeah.
I think. Okay. Are you planning on going to any stops this year? I know they go to Davenport for sure.
Oh, do they? I don't know. Maybe.
Oh, I was thinking about taking the. If all goes well, I haven't purchased my registration yet, but I'm thinking about doing it to force myself to do it. But taking the 78 Fairmont, at least to the St. Louis through Davenport's stops. So
78 Fairmont, is that the square headlight? 4 square headlights?
Yeah, mine's a Futurist. It's not a box top, but yep.
Cool.
Yeah,
I had friends with those.
Yes.
Maybe I usually make Power Tour kind of a last second decision. I know that's not the smartest way to do it, but that's kind of how I've always done it. It's not the type of event I have to hit every year, and I've never done the full thing. I've only done it for 2-3 days at a time wherever they go.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. Like Grant and I have talked about, Power Tour, because Power Tour would take place roughly about the middle between where I am and where Grant is. He's in Kansas City, and I'm on Canada's East Coast. So usually that runs right in the middle somewhere. So it's kind of the same. Well, depending on where it is, it's the same distance for me to go that far west as it is for him to come this far east. We've never met in person, and I thought that would always be a great opportunity to meet each other and drive the Hot Rod Power Tour together. I've always wanted to be able to do that.
Yeah, you've never met in person, really?
No. Well, we're 2,500 miles away from each other.
Someday we'll make it happen. We both booked ourselves up with a ton of trips in 2020. They're like, yeah, maybe we were actually going to go. My wife and I were going to go to visit Jason on our way to Iceland until we figured out that just made no sense. There's no good flights in and out of New Brunswick. But enough about that. We're kind of getting off track. And so, Rob, just wanted to tell you thanks for your time. We try to limit the show to right around 35 minutes, which we're kind of getting up against. And I mean, unless you're enjoying the conversation and want to go on further, I was just going to kind of turn it over to Jason to take us on home and kind of close the show out.
Yeah, no, it's great. Actually, I took advantage of the evening here, so I scheduled another meeting with a overseas company at 8. So I have to wait.
Well, that's great, Rod. We will sign off here very shortly, and feel free to stick around after we go off air, and we can chat for a few more minutes if you like. But we also want to thank everybody that's been in the chat and chatting it up with each other, and also providing us some questions here to keep the show rolling. If you're in the chat and you see some guys in there that you think you might like, most of us are YouTube guys, hit each other up, check out your channels. Don't forget to go into their comments, leave some comments, share your thoughts on what their videos are, and if you like what you see, go ahead and subscribe, because that really is what we decided we were going to do with this live stream, was to help support you guys and support each other. So thanks everyone for being a part of the show tonight. Rob, thanks for taking time out of your night for helping us and being a part of our show.
Oh, my pleasure.
And we will end this by saying, stay focused on the windshield, guys, not the rearview mirror. We'll see you next week.